base, but you didn't even try. I mean, it was amazing to see throughout the campaign the Clinton people who proved themselves to be tactically totally incompetent. You know, the main argument for the establishment corporate Democrats against the left has always been, oh, you idealists, you're idealists and your ideals are great, we all love them, but you don't understand tactics, you don't understand the hard mechanics of politics and how you win elections. They completely discredited themselves in this one because their basic calculation was, we don't have to worry about the traditional base, the Democratic Party. Those people, if the turnout among African American voters isn't as vigorous as it could be, if some white working class Democrats defect to Trump, no problem. We're going to replace them and more with upper crust Republicans who don't like Trump's personality. That was their calculation. The media was constantly celebrating that. And they didn't even realize, the Clinton people in the final stages, that they were vulnerable in Michigan, Wisconsin. They did realize Pennsylvania, but Michigan and Wisconsin, they had no clue, apparently. So they weren't able to mobilize. He mobilized in a deep way. And so what we have is people who could never win an election on their own. People like Sessions, who clearly, a national election, who clearly regrets the outcome of the civil rights movement. I think also regrets the outcome of the Civil War. People like the corporate types now populating Trump's cabinet, who want to dismantle 100 years of progress in protecting the rights of workers and the environment and general civil rights. Those people, say the Paul Ryan types, Paul Ryan was never going to get elected president on his own. Jeff Sessions could never get elected president. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce running on their own platform could never win. But in a Trump, they found the vehicle. Trump, but at the same time, Trump was not liked by the corporate elites, the Republican Party elite, because what he was doing was very uncomfortable. He was using a very complex, ancient political strategy that elites have used sometimes, and that is you increase your powers by attacking yourself. It's elites running against elites. It's what Mao did, and Mao and his people did in the Cultural Revolution. They mobilized people to attack the party and thereby strengthen Mao and his element of the party. It's what Wall Street did with the Tea Party movement, organize people to attack Wall Street and bring in representatives who will strengthen Wall Street. Trump went on the attack against the corporate elites who destroyed American jobs, and now has empowered those same corporate elites more than they ever have been. And while doing that, he blew their cover. He exposed them as a bunch of racists, as he exposed himself as a racist. And in order to sell his big lie, he told some uncomfortable truths. He said, the system is rigged. Americans, we're killers. You know, at one point there was this very revealing exchange on Morning Joe, where the Morning Joe people were going after Trump on the Russia issue.
On MSNBC.
Yeah, and they said to Trump, well, Putin has killed a lot of journalists, which is true. Putin is a murderer. And Trump, who at least at that moment, and still at this moment, is Putin's buddy, said, yeah, but we kill a lot of people too. We, the Americans, kill a lot of people too. And he would often blurt things out like that in the campaign, which is also true. So in pursuit of the big lie, which is that he and his rich buddies were going to address this class collapse in a constructive way, he, on the way, told a lot of these truths which really bothered others in the elite. So they were never thrilled about him. But he basically dragged them into the White House kicking and screaming. They would not have chosen him as their nominee in the first place, but he won it. And now here they are. They're sitting inside the seat of power.
Jeff Sessions was unusual in that he did choose him as his nominee.
That's right. Because Sessions is different. Sessions didn't worry about having his cover blown as a racist. I mean, he was already out. But the rest of the Republican Party, including the corporations never want to be thought of in that way. In fact, they go to great lengths to be perceived as the opposite. You know, the Jeb Bush type Republicans, they never want to be thought of as racist. That's anathema to them, partly because of the big political flip that happened in the 1960s. You know, for decades up until then, white racism had been a tremendous source of energy, kind of a molten core of politics that was largely harnessed by left-leaning elements in American politics, by the Democrats. I mean, FDR came to power and held power with the support of Southern Democrats who, at the same time they were supporting him, were also supporting lynching. You know, that was the political lineup, and the Republicans were more liberal, generally speaking, to the extent anyone in the power structure was on race. But then in the 60s, that all flipped during the LBJ years. And that same white racism became the energy source for the right and for the Republican Party in the U.S. But as the years went by, they went to greater and greater lengths to, while using that, pretending that they weren't using it. So they'd have Lee Atwater out there, but they'd have others putting makeup on the whole thing. And here Trump comes in and explodes all that and blows it. But the result is they're now in power. And so you have people at the Labor Department, at the EPA, in every agency whose mission, well, they have a series of missions, which they've been working on for decades, pretty much since the Powell Memorandum, which said, we have to fight back against the environmental movement, against the labor movement, against the consumer movement, against the various justice movements in order to recoup our losses and build new institutions. And now they're in there and they have a whole agenda. They want to privatize public assets. They want to lift regulations on corporate excesses and start imposing regulations on public protest even more than they're currently regulated. They want to do a series of things that will result in another radical transfer of wealth, probably even bigger than the one that happened after the Reagan years. And they could never sell that to the public, but they've ridden in on Trump's coattails and they're ready to go to work starting this afternoon.
Well, Naomi, you said in the first hour of our conversation that what we're witnessing with Trump's victory, and especially as we're seeing his cabinet appointments, is the final throes of neoliberalism. Now, why would you say it's the final throes rather than, as some would see it, its pinnacle?
Well, it's one or the other, but I think, after you've taken over the government, there isn't much left to do, right? I mean, when Exxon's running the State Department and Hardee's is running the Department of Labor, what's left, right? They're going to privatize PBS apparently. And I think that it's worth underlining that these, it's not just that these are corporate chieftains. It's really that they're the worst of the worst, right? I mean, true predators, paying workers an unlivable wage and then stealing those wages, right? And this is what has been happening at Hardee's and Carl's Jr. Systematic wage theft, not paying workers for the work that they're doing, and what Exxon has done in being a major funder of lies about climate change, bankrolling garbage science, taking full-page ads out in the New York Times saying the science isn't in when they themselves were doing the science, back in the 70s.
I mean, it was very interesting.
Right? I mean, kicking people out of their homes. So, I mean, we're really talking about bottom feeders here, who are very threatened by progress, very threatened by social movements. So, it's a combination of forces. It is that takeover. It is that sort of the final frontier of neoliberalism, but it is in response to these very real forces. And what worries me about this moment is kind of what I worry about sort of Bush redux in that, you're up against a foe that is so bad that there's a kind of lowest common denominator unity that can come in, right? And the risk of that is that we don't learn the lessons that I think Alan has just laid out so clearly in terms of the fact that Clinton didn't have anything to offer people, right? So-called progressive neoliberalism has nothing to offer in the face of this weird mixture of racism and anti-elite populism. It's got nothing, right? I mean, it was this Trump going all is hell and Hillary Clinton saying all is well. And I'm hearing too many people think, well, we should have had Biden,
Right.
as if that would have fixed everything. So we have to learn the lessons. There has to be a counterpower, counterforce, and candidates who have something genuinely redistributive to offer. It's not going to win over everyone, but it can peel away some of his base, and it can energize, more importantly.
One thing to remember is, both in the Democratic primary and in the general, this was really a very close election process.
Yeah.
It could easily have gone otherwise. Sanders could easily be president.
That's
Clinton could easily be president. She won the popular vote by almost 3 million.
I mean, it is amazing to think before the election that all of the prognosticators, almost uniformly in the media, they were saying that not only was Clinton going to win, but that the Republican Party was in complete shambles. That the Republican Party might not exist anymore. We divide into little other parties.
That was this endless refrain.
And now it is the exact opposite, that the Republican Party is in the ascendancy and the Democrats in this tremendous minority, both not only at the federal legislature, the Congress, but in state houses and governorships across the country, the Democrats are in complete disarray.
And no, I was just going to say, and they don't get it. The Democratic Party is still talking about the FBI, the Russians, messaging, and they're, even within this power struggle within the DNC, it's what is the affirmative message that the Democratic Party is putting forward, not just the reactive, we're not the Republicans, but what is it that they are actually putting forward? And I think that was ultimately the problem with Clinton, was that it was very difficult. It wasn't just a question of messaging. It was very difficult to actually be able to put forth a different strategy when your party has been in power for the last 8 years, overseeing the status quo. And there's still a failure to reckon with that within the parties. So there's the obsession with, was there Russian influence? Was it the FBI letter? And no one is actually talking about the central issue of the complete disconnect between this party and what is happening in the lives of ordinary people in this country.
Yeah. When you have an election that's this close, every factor ends up being truly decisive. So
Right.
You have to get over, say, this point, and you stack up bricks, and finally you clear the point by an inch. Well, every brick contributed to having cleared that. So yes, Russian intervention arguably pushed Trump over. He won by only 80,000 votes. Likewise, the Comey intervention and so on. But at the root of that is the fact that the Democratic corporate elite was, as you said, had nothing to offer and was completely tactically incompetent. And this means that the party is ripe for takeover by its base in a way that it hasn't been, realistically speaking, for many, many decades. And that's one of many huge opportunities that now
But who are the
exist.
base of the Democratic Party? How would you define that?
Working people, non-white people, people who've been discriminated against. In the American system, it's basically a two-party system. The Republicans are the most corporate of the parties. But it's also to the great advantage of people like Wall Street to have the second party, which ostensibly is the stand-in for poor people, for working people, for oppressed people, to have them also be dominated by corporate interests, although to a lesser extent. So if you have a Republican Party which is totally in their control, and a Democratic Party which is, say, in the control of the Clintons, and Robert Rubin, and people like that, it's tremendously to your advantage. But now that arrangement is vulnerable. It is possible.
So we're seeing this playing out at the battle over the DNC.
Oh, absolutely. The Ellison versus the others race is tremendous.
Well, let's talk about that. Talking about Keith Ellison, the Minneapolis Congress member, first Muslim elected to Congress, African American, to say the least, extremely, forget the tactics, but the symbolism of a president, Donald Trump, who says he's going to initiate this Muslim registry, and the spokesperson for the Democratic Party being the first Muslim elected to Congress.
Yeah, and he was a lead supporter of Sanders, and he had that famous exchange on, I think it was the ABC George Stephanopoulos show, very early on in the process, where he said, well, you know, Trump might win. And Stephanopoulos and one of the other panelists, I believe was from the Times, they said, you can't be serious, you can't be serious. And they just burst out laughing. I mean, he saw it clearly.
He's up against Tom Perez. Explain who he is, the former Labor Secretary.
Yeah, the Labor Secretary for Obama, who had a very progressive record on civil rights when he was in the Justice Department, but who, as Labor Secretary, helped Obama push through the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Deal. And he apparently did so just from his body language and looked reluctant, but that has been his position. And he was apparently specifically advanced by the Obama White House as a means of stopping Ellison and the progressive elements in the Democratic Party. But it's a huge race, it's a huge choice, but it's only the beginning. If the party can be taken over by its own base, then you have the possibility of going out and challenging, for example, Republican congressional office holders in their districts. I mean, one of the reasons that the right dominates the U.S. House is gerrymandering. They were smart enough to plan in advance, and they had control at the time of the last census, and they drew the districts specifically to get their members in, their ultra-right members in. But one consequence of that is that these politicians are soft. They're not used to facing any opposition except from their right. If a challenge can be mounted to them in their districts from another direction, from a locally based progressive candidates, they can be caught off guard. They wouldn't know what hit them because they have not had any real opposition for years upon years. I mean, there are all sorts of things that can be done. Not even at the level of street, not even talking yet about the level of street protest. I mean,
Well, on that question, we'd like to go to a street protest that's going on right now, the Black Lives Matter protest, where police are moving in. Carla Wills, one of our producers in the field, just sent us this update.
We're here at the checkpoint next to the DC Metropolitan Police Department. It has been successfully closed, shut down by Black Lives Matter activists. I'm standing here with someone from Surge. Hey, tell me your name, where you're from.
Yeah, I'm Michaela Litton. I'm from DC. I organize with Showing Up for Racial Justice DC.
And you were at another checkpoint before you came here. Explain to me what happened at the other checkpoint, where that was and what happened there.
Yeah, so we were at a checkpoint a couple blocks from here. That was this checkpoint organized largely by Surge, and we were pretty quickly moved out of there by the Secret Service. As soon as we moved out of there, we came over to join the Movement for Black Lives checkpoint here at the police department headquarters, and we successfully shut down this checkpoint in partnership with them. So it really makes me feel like we're stronger together, and we're building a multiracial coalition to resist Trump's agenda for the next 4 years.
And describe that scene and how it got actually shut down and what happened. How did the Secret Service announce that it was actually officially closed?
Yeah, so we had folks come in and just move to the front and sit down. The gates behind me were still open at that point, and the Secret Service moved to shut the gates so that the Trump supporters who were trying to get into Inauguration would no longer try stepping and kicking our members. We showed up with love, and we think they showed up with some frustration, but we're trying to build a coalition that to build a more just future. We share the same values of free speech and nonviolence, we hope.
And Alex Jones was just through here talking about assault. He was saying that there was a woman who was assaulted. Explain what happened. Your response.
Yeah, I'm happy to say that Alex Jones left pretty quickly. He took his hate home, but he immediately started spreading a false rumor that a white woman was assaulted. That's not true, and it is, I hate to say, part of a long history of white supremacists using white women's bodies as tools of white supremacy. He, as many have before him, tried throwing a white woman into the issue to say that black men in particular were violating her body. It's part of this long history, and we know factually that for centuries the primary perpetrators of interracial violence have been white men, and they've been attacking and sexually attacking white women, be it slave owners or cops today.
Thank you. Again, we're standing here at the checkpoint that is next to the Metropolitan Police Department. Earlier here, there were several Black Lives Matter protesters who chained their bodies to the barricades in two places here at this checkpoint. It is now officially shut down. The Secret Service has closed it. So now back to you, Amy, in our meeting studio.